Hey, welcome to another episode of our series TPR Live. Today we are going to be talking about comparisons. Specifically, we are going to be looking at faulty comparisons. Before we get into what that is, though, we're going to do a little warm-up. So go ahead and grab a pencil, pen, paper, something to write with, and write down which of these sentences or sentence has an error or have errors. So number 1 says, Sahil's laptop is better than Jasmine. So listen to that yourself, see if you think there's a problem, write it down. Number 2, my shoes are newer than those of my brother. Number 3, the number of calories in an apple is fewer than a donut. And number 4, unlike New York, Floridians enjoy warm days throughout the year. So go ahead and jot them down, whichever you think are correct or incorrect. I'm not going to tell you how many there are. At least one is incorrect and at least one is correct. If you found one that's incorrect, see if you can create a variation that would work. We're going to come back to this at the end. All right. So we're talking about comparisons, and when we're evaluating two or more things, we tend to use the comparative or superlative form of an adjective or adverb. So the comparative, words like more, or when we add the suffix er, taller than, prettier than, younger than, just things like that, that's our comparative. And then we have the superlative. In some words, it ends in est, the suffix est, and sometimes we use the most or least. So the tallest or the most beautiful. We're not going to get into that specifically today. We're looking at faulty comparisons. So the first thing you want to think about when you're dealing with a faulty comparison is words. What words indicate that you've got a comparison on your hands? So simple words like, resemble, similar, the same as, and unlike are all words that denote you're comparing things. Sometimes you've got more than one word. You've got words that go together, like as, she's as tall as, or less than, more than. Or you might have your comparative adjective or adverb, than, so taller than, quicker than. And then finally, not so as. These topics might show up on your SAT or ACT. So if you're sorry, one of the things being compared isn't stated explicitly in that situation because it's incomplete. Now we can look at that example. So geometry is harder to understand. Well, geometry, it's harder to understand. We get it. It's difficult, but it's harder to understand than what? You see, we have this ER here. That's our comparative form of the word. And we need to show what are we comparing geometry with. It's harder to understand than rocket science. Geometry is harder to understand than algebra. Geometry is harder to understand than why my cat has the zoomies in the morning. We don't know. So we have to make sure that we're explicitly stating whatever it is that we're comparing the first item to. Let's see another example. Adding cilantro makes it taste better. Okay, so if you like cilantro, you might agree it makes it taste better, right? Hey, it's a general blanket statement, but adding cilantro makes it taste better than what? Makes it taste better than if we didn't have cilantro? Adding cilantro makes it taste better than if we added oregano? We have to be clear. And there's another issue with this sentence. We've got an ambiguous it. We're not going to get into it today, but just think about that. What does the it represent? With faulty comparisons, a lot of times the problem is that we're lacking clarity. So we want to make sure that when we're writing, when we're testing, whatever it is that we're doing with grammar, everything is totally clear and precise. Okay. So another It's easier to work out when you have a gym in your building. If you have a gym in your building or you know someone who does, you can probably agree with that statement. But what does that statement actually mean? It's easier to work out when you have a gym in your building than what? It's easier to work out when you have a gym in your building than when you don't have a gym in your building? Or is it easier when you have a track in your backyard? Or is it easier than when you have a bicycle? Right? So we don't have a clear comparison in the first sentence. The second one here is one example of many different forms that you could write. So I just gave a parallel comparison, having a gym versus not having a gym. But it could be easier to work out when you have a gym in your building than a myriad of different things. So whenever you're dealing with these comparisons, you want to make sure that the item being compared and the item with which you're comparing it are both present in the sentence so that you don't have any problems with lack of clarity. So here's another example. I run faster. Okay, I run faster. I run faster than you run? Or do I run faster than I ran last year? In the first example, we don't know. So again, I need to compare I run faster than what to make the comparison complete. So let's move on to another type of comparison, your illogical comparison. And these ones can be really tricky. So an illogical comparison happens when two unlike things are compared. Here's an example. The price of popcorn in the grocery store is cheaper than the movie theater. It's true, right? A lot of times you go to the grocery store, it's cheaper to get popcorn there than the movies. But when you look at this sentence, look at what's being compared. Here we have the price of popcorn and the movie theater. But you can't compare the price with a movie theater, right? That's not logical. That's not what we're talking about. We're saying the cost or the price of the popcorn in place one, the grocery store, is cheaper than the cost or the price of the popcorn in the movie theater. So this is a super clunky and kind of funky sentence, so it might even be difficult to know that there's an error in the first place, but here's one way we could rewrite it. We could just say the price of popcorn in the grocery store is cheaper than the price of popcorn in the movie theater. It's long, it's wordy, but now it's totally clear that we're talking about the price here versus the price there. And when you're rewording things, when you're dealing with illogical comparisons, there's usually a few different varieties of how you could reword something. And we'll see some more examples in a moment. So let's look at this next one. The steeping time of iced coffee is shorter than to make cold brew. Well, if you drink iced coffee or cold brew or know anyone who does, you probably have heard the claim that cold brew is steeped for a really long time, and it all makes sense, right? But remember, we want to ask ourselves, what's being compared? And here we have the steeping time of iced coffee. We're comparing that to the steeping time of cold brew, but the sentence says the steeping time then to make cold brew. So we're missing something. We're missing our direct comparison here. So we could just say the steeping time of iced coffee is shorter than the steeping time of cold brew. It's long and it's wordy, but it makes sense and it's totally clear, steeping time and steeping time. And there are a few other ways to write it, so let's look at one more. The steeping time of iced coffee is shorter than that of cold brew. Okay, that sounds kind of funny, right? Like than that of. Actually, that's correct. The word that is standing in for the steeping time. It's replacing the noun. That is a demonstrative pronoun. So let's do a little bit more with that and another demonstrative, those. Maya's quiz grade was higher than Luke. So obviously what's going on is Maya got a higher score on her quiz than Luke did, right? We all know that. But when we're looking at comparisons, this sentence is comparing Maya's quiz grade to Luke, the human being. But we can't compare a quiz grade to a person, and that's not what we mean. So let's look at option one. We can say it like it is. Maya's quiz grade was higher than Luke's quiz grade. Parallel, everything matches up. No question about what's being compared. Next example, Maya's quiz grade was higher than Luke's. Now we've got a possessive noun, Luke's, and Luke's is referring back to quiz grade. And then a third option, we could say Maya's quiz grade was higher than that of Luke, just like we saw in the last sentence, the that of. Okay, so any of these three variations will totally work. There's no question about what is being compared. Let's look at one last example of an illogical comparison. Asha's flowers are more vibrant than Adam. Okay, so what's being compared here? We see Asha's flowers versus Adam. As you now know, we're definitely not comparing the flowers to Adam. We want to compare Asha's flowers to Adam's flowers. So option 1, Asha's flowers are more vibrant than Adam's flowers. Okay. Asha's flowers are more vibrant than Adam's. All right. And then the last variation here that we're going to do, try to guess what it is before I reveal it. You know, it's going to start with Asha's flowers are more vibrant. And here we go. Asha's flowers are more vibrant than those of Adam. So here we have the word those. Notice it's not that like we saw in the last one. Well, what's the difference? One very important difference. That replaces a singular noun, and those replaces a plural noun. So those flowers are plural. So we couldn't say Asha's flowers are more vibrant than that of Adam because that doesn't match up. Now we have a pronoun problem. It's not agreeing. So just be very careful. And if you're doing any kind of standardized test, watch out for words like that, of, those, of, because that probably means you're This happens when you're not really sure which two things are actually being compared. So I might say, I like math more than you. Sounds fine, right? But actually, do I mean that I like math more than I like you? Or do I mean that I like math more than you do, more than you like math? In this first sentence, we don't know. I could mean either of those things, so it's not going to work because it's lacking clarity. It would have to say, I like math more than I like you, or I like math more than you like math, to be clear. So let's see another example of an ambiguous comparison. My sister is more frightened of spiders than my brother. Well, that can mean a couple of things, couldn't it? My sister is more frightened of spiders than my brother is. So she's more scared of spiders than he is scared of spiders? Or my sister is more frightened of spiders than she's frightened of my brother? Is she afraid of my brother? We can't know. So we just want to make sure that we clarify which it is. Okay, and I see a question coming in on the chat here. So Dean asks, why should we watch out for words like that of and those of? So if you're on a standardized test, ACT or SAT or anything else, you're dealing with someone or something in a group, and you're comparing that person with other people in a group with which that person is a member or is affiliated, you want to use the word other or else. So that's a really clunky way of saying it. So let's see what that actually looks like. So if we see this sentence here, Hyrule is faster than anyone on the swim team. what that sentence is saying is that Jairo, the individual, is faster than anyone on the swim team, but it actually says that he's not on the swim team. So if you meant to say that he's a member of the swim team and he's the fastest or faster than anyone else, you would actually need to say anyone else. So here we go. Jairo is faster than anyone else on the swim team. This else indicates that he's part of that group, part of that swim team. Another way you could say it to have clarity would be Jairo is faster than any other swimmer on the team. Now, this example is a little bit redundant, swimmer, swim team. We could just say he's faster than any other swimmer on the team, would be one way of doing it. Okay, but in either situation, we have the word else or other added to that sentence to show that Jairo is part of that group. So let's see another example. Tawana is more studious than any student in the class. So kudos to Tawana for being studious, but in this sentence, Tawana is not necessarily in the class, right? So we need to use one of those words, other or else, to make it clear that she is one of the students. So we could say Tawana is more studious than any other student in the class. There's our other. Or we could say Tawana is more studious than anyone else in the class. And there are other ways that you could word these sentences, of course. These are just several examples to show you how you might word it to use the else and the other to indicate that that person is, in fact, part of the group with which you're comparing him or her. All right, so we've talked about incomplete, out there, but we're just covering these for today. So let's do a little quiz here. And we're going to do 3 questions. So if you have your paper and pencil handy, go ahead and grab it again, and let's take a look at the first one. So it says, the kitten's paws were dirtier than the dog. Remember, you want to ask yourself, what's being compared here? Take a moment to ask yourself, what are we comparing? Well, in this situation, we are going to be comparing the kitten's paws to the dog's paws, right? The way it's written, it says the kitten's paws were dirtier than the dog, but we want to say the dog's paws. So A is not going to work. Let's look at the next one. The kitten's paws were dirtier than the dog was. It's also not going to work because we want to compare paws to paws. So now we're down to C and D, and we see the that of and the those of that we were just talking about. So remember, one of them is singular and one of them is plural. We're dealing with kitten's paws. Paws is plural, so we want to go with the plural variation, and that's going to be those of. So the kitten's paws were dirtier than those of the dog. Okay, it looks like I was cut out, so I will re-answer Dean's question. Sure, sorry about that. So the that of and those of, as you can actually see in this example here, in this situation, we saw, okay, our answer choices had the words that of and those of. So even if we hadn't read the question, we might have a hint that we're dealing with a comparison situation. So they're just words that indicate a comparison. And because faulty comparisons can be extra tricky, it's good to notice, okay, I see that of, or I see those of, so let me slow down. Let me remind myself, okay, that is for singular, those is for plural, and make sure that if one of those is the correct answer, and no, that of or those of is not always going to be the correct answer. It's just an indicator that you're dealing with a comparison. Just make sure that everything matches up, that your pronoun agrees with the noun that is replacing or referring back to. Let me know if you need me to clarify anything else or if that works for you, Dean. Okay, so let's look at the next question. My mom enjoys tacos more than my dad. So now we're dealing with tacos. And remember, we want it to be totally clear who's doing what, and in this case, enjoying what. So mom enjoys tacos more than dad. Well, the way that this is written, can you think of what type of faulty comparison we're dealing with? This is actually an ambiguous comparison, and I see Lynn's asking what's the difference between ambiguous and incomplete. So this is a good place to talk about that, Lynn. So this one here is ambiguous, and I'll talk you through as we go through the answers here. My mom enjoys tacos more than my dad, because in this one, it's actually saying that she likes tacos more than my dad, or could be saying that, we don't know. So that's ambiguous, meaning it's vague. We're not sure what she actually means. And with that, we can cross off our first answer choice. Right? So the next one, my mom enjoys tacos more than my dad's. More than my dad's what? It doesn't tell us. So more than my dad's tacos could be, but we don't know. So B is not going to work either. And C pretty much means the same thing as B, those of my dad. But we don't know those of my dad, the tacos of my dad. We're not sure. And then D, finally, is the longest one. It's clunkiest, but it is the only one that gives us a clear, not ambiguous explanation. My mom enjoys tacos more than my dad enjoys tacos. So Lynn, maybe we could see a sentence that said, I like tacos better. If that were my sentence, I like tacos better, that would be an incomplete comparison because better than what? So it's when you use that comparative form of the word, in this case, better, and you don't show what exactly you're comparing against. I like tacos better than ice cream. I like tacos better than tortilla chips. We don't know what you're comparing against unless you have that other noun that you're comparing with. So that's the difference with your ambiguous. Ambiguous, we're not really sure what the writer or speaker means because the sentence is worded in a kind of funky, unclear way. And in the incomplete, we're actually missing the comparison, the other thing that's being compared. If you have any other question about that, go ahead and follow up in the chat. All right, so our last practice question here. Shayna, my friend, is taller than anyone I know. Okay, now if you remember from the last thing that we spoke about, we have the group comparison. And when we're talking about anyone, we have to use certain words if they're part of a group, the person being compared as part of a group. So in this case, Shayna's my friend, and I'm saying that Shayna's taller than anyone I know. But if I know Shayna and anyone I know, that means that she's probably somebody I know, right? If she's my friend, I know her. I couldn't, right? So we have to figure out which answer choice is going to make this work. So clearly, based on what I just said, choice A won't work because we don't have one of those words, else or other. We need to show that Shayna is part of the pool of people whom I know. So choice B, Shayna, my friend, is taller than the other one I know. The other one, what? That doesn't exactly answer this correctly here. So we can get rid of that. And then we're down to 2, C and D. Shayna, my friend, is taller than anyone else I know. Or Shayna, my friend, is taller than any other I know. D is not going to work because we don't know any other what. It's not clear. So we would have to say Shayna, my friend, is taller than anyone else I know. Now it's clear because of the word else that Shayna is among the people I know. Okay, so now it's time to go back to that very first thing that we saw. Now that you've seen 4 different types of faulty comparisons, let's see if you're able to figure out which ones are correct or incorrect. So number 1, Sahil's laptop is better than Jasmine. This one is not gonna work, right? In this case, in the sentence as it's written, we're comparing Sahil's laptop to Jasmine. But most likely, if you were writing that sentence, you meant to compare Sahil's laptop to that of Jasmine or Jasmine's laptop. So you could say Sahil's laptop is better than Jasmine's laptop. You could say Sahil's laptop is better than Jasmine's. Or you could say Sahil's laptop is better than that of Jasmine. Okay. And I see a comment from Vasvi, didn't understand two. Is that this next two that we're coming up on or from the previous? I can go back to the previous slide after I finish these if it was that one. Just let me know which one you're not so sure about. And as I wait for that response, I'll move on to the next one here, number 2. So number 2 here on this particular slide we're looking at, my shoes are newer than those of my brother. Guess what? As funky and crazy as it sounds, that is totally correct, right? Because I'm comparing my shoes to the shoes of my brother. So since shoes is plural, I would use those of. How many of you got that one correct? If you got it, awesome. If not, now you know to watch out for those and use the those of when you're dealing with comparing plural nouns. Okay, I will go back to the previous number 2 in just a moment, sure, after I finish 3 and 4 on this slide. Okay, so number 3 here. The number of calories in an apple is fewer than a donut. So if you're thinking about it logically, yeah, typically apples tend to have fewer calories than donuts do. But this comparison is incorrect because it says the number of calories is fewer than a donut. We would have to say the number of calories in an apple is fewer than the number of calories in a donut. Or we could use another variation, but we have to make it clear that we're talking about the number of calories in one thing versus the number of calories in another. And then the last one here, unlike New York, when you're thinking about it, clearly we're talking about there are more sunny, nice, warm days in Florida than there are in New York, but that's not what the sentence says. The sentence is comparing New York with Floridians. But New York's a place and Floridians are people, so you can't compare a place to people. So you could say, unlike New York, Florida enjoys warm days throughout the year. Or unlike New Yorkers, Floridians enjoy warm days throughout the year. Okay, so you want to make sure that the two things you're comparing are also parallel and that they agree with one another. Okay, I'm going to jump back to the previous slide to go over number 2 again. If anyone has any questions about these or the questions on the previous set, just please indicate which number and which questions in the chat. Okay, so moving back to number 2 to clarify number 2. My mom enjoys tacos more than my dad. So the problem with number 2 is that we're not actually sure if she enjoys tacos, the food, more than she enjoys my dad, like my dad's company, because of the way that it's written. So we have to be specific and clarify. That's why this is called an ambiguous comparison, because we're just uncertain. If it said my mom likes tacos more than my dad, kind of like the example sentence, I like math more than you, it would be the same situation. So something with a preference or a lack of preference, like disliking something, we have to clarify what it is. So my mom enjoys tacos more than my dad. We don't know if it's talking about the dad or tacos. And B and C are problematic because it's talking about dad something, but we don't know what. So if we said my mom enjoys tacos more than my dad's tacos, even that wouldn't really work because it's not the same comparison. You'd have to say my mom enjoys my uncle's tacos more than she enjoys my dad's tacos. So it's really a question of precision and making sure that we understand exactly what the person means. So choice D, my mom enjoys tacos more than my dad enjoys tacos. Even though it's the wordiest, it's the only one that tells us explicitly what it is that she enjoys, and there's no confusion. We know that she's not saying she enjoys tacos more than she enjoys my dad. Does that make sense? And if anybody else has any other questions, feel free to type them in. You know, we have a little bit of a delay between you asking questions and me answering, so I'll hang out on this slide for just a moment here. Okay, so I will go to my official question slide. Since the last one we went over our cool down, we reviewed all the questions. So if you have any of your own questions to add, now is the time to ask. I'm happy to answer anything that you have about faulty comparisons. And as I wait to find out whether you guys have questions, just, be sure to, in your own writing, be mindful of these words, the words similar, unlike, like, that, those, to make sure that everything's agreeing. Because the problem with the faulty comparisons is that things might sound fine, and logically, we totally understand what the speaker or writer means. But from a grammatical perspective, if we're missing words, then it's not going to be a good comparison. It'll be faulty, and there will be something that needs to be fixed. Okay, so if you guys don't have any other questions, feel free to type any follow-up questions in the chat, in the comment section, sorry. All right, yeah, looks like we're good. Awesome. So yeah, if you watch this video later, if you think of something later, feel free to comment beneath the video, and we're happy to answer your questions. So thank you all for tuning in, and I'll see you next time. Have a great week.